Hello students, in this video I'll talk about the adrenal cortex and the most important hormone produced by this adrenal cortex, that is the glucocorticoids. Adrenal glands, otherwise they are called as the suprarenal glands, or two in number, and each of it weighs around 5 grams. They are the triangular glands which are situated on the upper pole of each kidney. They are called as the glands of emergency as they secrete the most vital hormones which are needed during the emergency situations. The adrenal gland comprises of two parts. One is the outer cortex and the next one is the inner medulla. So I'll elaborate on the adrenal cortex and the hormone glucocorticoids produced by this adrenal cortex. Adrenal cortex is a mesodermal derivative. During fetal life, the cortex comprises of two parts, that is the outer neocortex and the inner fetal cortex. Now, this inner layer rapidly involutes, and the outer neocortex differentiates into three layers of the adrenal cortex. Adrenal cortex consists of three distinct layers, both structure wise as well as functionally also. The first outermost layer is called as the zona glomerulosa, the middle layer is called as the zona fasciculata, and the innermost layer is called as the zona reticularis. So, this is the picture of the adrenal gland. It has got outer cortex and the inner medulla. The cortex is further divided into three layers, that is the outer zona glomerulosa, middle zona fasciculata, and the innermost layer, that is the zona reticularis. Regarding the histological structure of each layer, zona glomerulosa is the outer one-fifth of the cortex. This consists of acinus-like groups of cells. The zona fasciculata is a middle as well as the widest zone of the adrenal cortex. The cells are arranged in thick straight columns. Between these columns of cells, we can see the sinusoids. The cells also contain high cholesterol content, and because of this, they appear as either clear or vacuolated in stained sections. The zona reticularis is the innermost zone. It consists of a network of compactly arranged cells. The outermost layer, zona glomerulosa, synthesize the mineralocorticoids. The middle layer, zona fasciculata, secrete the glucocorticoids, whereas the innermost layer, that is the zona reticularis, secrete the sex steroids. The glucocorticoids are very essential for survival. They play a very important role in the integrated response to stress adaptation by their metabolic effects and also by their physiological actions. How this adrenal gland is stimulated to synthesize these glucocorticoids, that is the cortisol. The corticotrophin releasing hormone is secreted by the paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, and this hormone reaches the anterior pituitary through the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system, and this will stimulate the synthesis and the release of adrenocorticotrophic hormone. So, this adrenocorticotrophic hormone is secreted by the anterior pituitary, which will act on the adrenal gland and stimulate the secretion of the glucocorticoids, that is the cortisol. Glucocorticoids are usually synthesized from the cholesterol. The cells of the adrenal cortex has got a lot of LDL receptors, that is the low density lipoprotein receptors. So the LDL from the blood combines with these receptors and enter into the cell by endocytosis, and they get stored as cholesterol esters in the cytoplasmic vacuoles. Usually the glucocorticoids are synthesized from free cholesterol under basal conditions, but when stimulated by adrenocorticotrophic hormone, that is the ACTH, the stored cholesterol ester is hydrolyzed to free cholesterol by enzymes called as the cholesterol esterases. Now, this free cholesterol enters into mitochondria and gets converted to pregnenolone by the enzyme called as the 2022 desmolase. Now, this conversion of free cholesterol to pregnenolone is a rate limiting step in the synthesis of the glucocorticoids. Now, the pregnenolone enters into the endoplasmic reticulum and gets converted into progesterone by the enzyme called as the 3 beta 01 dehydrogenase. Now, this pregnenolone and the progesterone can be converted to their respective 17 hydroxy components, that is the 17 hydroxy pregnenolone and 17 hydroxy progesterone by the enzyme called as the 17 alpha hydroxylase. Now, this progesterone, which has been formed from the pregnenolone, again gets converted to 11 deoxycorticosterone and 11 deoxycortisol by the enzyme called as the 21 hydroxylase. Now, this 11 deoxycortisol is transported back to the mitochondria from the endoplasmic reticulum and gets converted to cortisol, and this rapidly comes out of the cell. Usually, the cortisol is not stored in large quantities inside the cells of the adrenal cortex. Only when the need for the hormone arises, the entire sequence is going to get activated by the ACTH, that is the adrenocorticotropic hormone. So, some of the endogenous glucocorticoids, that is, the glucocorticoids produced inside the body, are cortisol, cortisone, and corticosterone. The circadian rhythm of the ACTH secretion is a very important regulator of the cortisol secretion also. The bursts of ACTH is more frequent in the early morning, especially around 4 to 10 am, and this accounts for about 75% of the total ACTH secretion which occurs in a day. Since cortisol synthesis depends entirely on the ACTH secretion, cortisol also follows the similar pattern as ACTH. That is, cortisol has got very high plasma levels in the early morning. In the plasma, cortisol circulates in two forms, that is in bound and the free form. The free form is very less, that is, it is only 5 to 10%, and this is responsible for the physiological actions of the hormone and the negative feedback regulation of the ACTH. Remaining 90% is bound to proteins called as the cortisol binding globulin, otherwise called as the transcortin. This is a glycoprotein produced by the liver. Then why it should get bound to proteins? Because only the free form is going to cause the physiological actions. It should get bound because it protects the hormone from the metabolic degradation and getting excreted in the urine. And so this is going to serve as a circulatory reserve for the hormone. Because of its protein binding, the lifespan of the cortisol is also going to be more, that is around 60 to 90 minutes. The cortisol is also metabolized in the liver to the glucuronides. So, the measurement of the urinary metabolites, we can tell about the rough amount of the cortisol secretion just by measuring the urinary metabolites. And hence, this can be used as a reliable index to tell about the cortisol secretion. Glucocorticoids bind to the high affinity cytoplasmic receptors and form the hormone receptor complex. This complex migrates to the nucleus and binds on the specific region on the DNA, and this initiates the gene transcription. In this way, regulation of protein synthesis occurs, which results in specific responses. The main functions of cortisol is that it has got major effects on protein, glucose and fat metabolism. So we'll discuss the metabolic effects one by one. What is the effect of glucocorticoids on carbohydrate metabolism? Overall, the glucocorticoids causes hyperglycemia by various mechanisms. The first mechanism is it enhances gluconeogenesis. Now, how this is going to enhance gluconeogenesis? One is, first, what is gluconeogenesis? It is a production of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, that is called as the gluconeogenesis. So production of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources is called as the gluconeogenesis. Now the synthesis of enzymes involved in this gluconeogenesis is increased by the glucocorticoids. For example, glucose 6 phosphatase. And second one, it provides amino acids to the liver also for gluconeogenesis by proteolysis. that is the breakdown of the amino acids from the skeletal muscles, and also it inhibits the protein synthesis in the skeletal muscles. And third one is it increases the lipolysis and gives more glycerol to the liver for gluconeogenesis. So gluconeogenesis is enhanced by three mechanisms. One is it increases the enzymes of the gluconeogenesis. Second one is it gives amino acids to the liver for gluconeogenesis by proteolysis. And third one is by increasing lipolysis, it gives more glycerol to the liver for gluconeogenesis. Second one is it decreases the glucose utilization by the peripheral tissues. It decreases the utilization or the uptake of glucose by the peripheral tissues like muscle, skin, and the connective tissue, but the heart, brain, and liver are spared for this action. So, the glucose is not used by the peripheral tissues or diverted to the brain, heart, and other vital organs so that they can act better to handle the stress or the emergency situations. And the important thing to note over here is the glucose increase, that is the hyperglycemia, is associated with glycogen breakdown. But in case of glucocorticoids, it promotes gluconeogenesis as well as the storage of carbohydrates as hepatic glycogens. So the glycogen synthesis is also increased by increasing the glycogen synthetase enzyme. Glucocorticoids are essential for survival during fasting. In normal individuals, during fasting, that is without taking food, cortisol by various mechanisms tries to increase the blood sugar and maintains the normal blood glucose level. But in patients with adrenocortical deficiency, as long as the patient takes food, blood glucose will be normal. But during fasting, there is no cortisol to increase the glucose, and so the patient may die due to fasting induced hypoglycemia. So specific advice should be given to such patients to not fast. So as I told earlier, cortisol causes proteolysis in the skeletal muscles and release of amino acids. Alanine is one such amino acid released like this, which is an essential substrate for gluconeogenesis. The proteolysis which happens in the muscles causes the negative nitrogen balance. The glucocorticoids also inhibits the protein synthesis in the skeletal muscles. So these two effects can lead to loss of muscle mass. The only exception to the protein catabolic effect is the new proteins which are synthesized or newly formed in the liver, leading to the synthesis of enzymes involved in gluconeogenesis. So, the anabolic effect of synthesizing enzymes of gluconeogenesis happens only at the level of the liver by the cortisol. Cortisol causes some amount of lipolysis also, but this has got a permissive role in lipolysis. That is, cortisol should be present for the growth hormone and epinephrine to carry out the action of the lipolysis. Due to lipolysis, large amounts of free fatty acids and glycerol are released, which can be used for gluconeogenesis. Whenever free fatty acids are formed, that is, or increased, this can lead to ketogenesis, which has got a very adverse effect on the diabetes patients. The action of cortisol also varies from tissues to tissues. It stimulates lipogenesis in selective areas by activating the enzyme, that is the lipoprotein lipase, as well as the glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase, and this is going to increase the differentiation of pre-adipocytes to adipocytes in the adipose tissue. So cortisol excess can cause selective accumulation of fat in the abdomen and trunk, and that is called as the truncal obesity, and this will spare the extremities because the extremities are also said to be thin because of the proteolysis happening in the skeletal muscles. The deposition of fat in the face is called as the moon face, and that in the suprascapular region is called as the buffalo hump. The cortisol also stimulates neuropeptide Y synthesis from the hypothalamus, which in turn can increase the appetite and the food intake also. So even this factor can be attributed for the excess of fat deposition due to increased food intake. At the same time, cortisol increases the leptin synthesis also, which inhibits feeding. So, obesity to some extent is limited by the negative feedback action of the leptin also. In normal individuals, cortisol increases the blood sugar, and this in turn will increase the insulin secretion, which is going to prevent the ketone body formation. But in case of diabetes, there is lack of insulin, so cortisol raises the blood glucose, and there is no opposing effect for this, and this again favors ketoacidosis, making the diabetes worse. Here I have summarized the effects of glucocorticoids on metabolism. In the liver, glucocorticoids will favor the synthesis of hepatic glycogens, and also gluconeogenesis is enhanced in the liver. Gluconeogenesis is nothing but the formation of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources is called as gluconeogenesis. In the muscle, proteolysis occurs, and these amino acids are diverted to the liver for gluconeogenesis. In the adipose tissue, lipolysis occurs, and the free fatty acids which are released or diverted to the liver again for gluconeogenesis. The presence of glucocorticoids are essential for other hormones to carry out their respective physiological actions, and this is called as the permissive action of the glucocorticoids or cortisol. Some of them are the vasopressor and the bronchodilator effects of the catecholamines, lipolytic effects of the catecholamines, synthesis of surfactant and lung maturation, hepatic enzyme systems of fetal life, and development of the bacterial flora in the intestine. For example, the catecholamines can exert their vasopressor and bronchodilator effects better only in the presence of glucocorticoids, but as such, the glucocorticoids cannot produce the vasopressor or the bronchodilator effects by itself. This is called as the permissive role of the glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids has some mineralocorticoid activity also, that is aldosterone like activity. So when there is cortisol excess, there is more of sodium and chloride retention, so patient can develop hypertension. Second is cortisol inhibits antidiuretic hormone secretion, so there is free water clearance and urine is diluted. In patients with adrenocortical deficiency, there is no free water clearance, that is, water cannot be excreted. So, for such patients, if we are going to infuse large volume of saline or glucose solution, glucose will be metabolized, but the body cannot excrete water because of the absence of cortisol. This can lead to hypoosmolarity of plasma due to hemodilution. Because of this, the brain cells will swell up, and this will impair the thermoregulatory centers of the hypothalamus, so that the patient will develop high fever and may also collapse. Hence, whenever saline is an absolute indication for patients with adrenocortical deficiency, we should always be cautious in giving corticosteroids for such patients along with saline. Cortisol increases the performance of the skeletal and cardiac muscle due to increase in the acetylcholine synthesis in the neuromuscular junctions. But also, excess cortisol can decrease the mass and strength of the muscle because of the proteolysis of the skeletal muscles, which we have discussed earlier. Cortisol decreases the collagen synthesis, which is the ground substance. So this causes thinning of skin as well as the thinning of walls of the capillaries. The capillaries become fragile and easily rupture, and this can lead to intracutaneous hemorrhage. Cortisol inhibits bone formation by various mechanisms. It decreases synthesis of collagen, type 1 collagen, which is the basic substance of the bone matrix. It also prevents the formation of the mature osteoblasts from the osteoprogenitor cells, and also enhances the rate of apoptosis of the already formed osteoblasts. It inhibits the calcium absorption from the gastrointestinal tract, and also enhances the calcium excretion in the urine. Cortisol also favors bone resorption by increasing the osteoclastic activity, and also it increases the activity of the enzyme collagenase, which will destroy the organic matrix of the bone. So, cortisol always decreases the bone mass and promotes osteoporosis. Hence, the patients receiving therapeutic steroids for a longer period of time, especially in elderly persons, should be always advised for bone x ray or MRI to have a check on the osteoporotic changes. Otherwise, the patient may land up in fractures and even vertebral collapse can occur. Cortisol can influence the mood and behavior of a person. Excess of cortisol can impair memory, and also it decreases the sleep. It is also associated with increased brain excitability and decreased threshold for convulsions. That's why glucocorticoids are contraindicated in seizure patients. Cortisol causes leukocytosis because of the increased neutrophils as well as the monocytes, but it causes profound lymphocytopenia, basopenia, and eosinophenia. It causes mild erythrocytosis due to stimulation of the hormone erythropoietin and mild thrombocytosis. Glucocorticoids increases the hydrochloric acid secretion in the stomach, and also it inhibits the proliferation of the gastric mucosal cells, so that this will precipitate peptic ulcer during prolonged therapeutic administration of cortisol. So I had listed out the important physiological actions of the cortisol. In the liver, gluconeogenesis is favored, that is production of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. In the muscle, proteolysis occurs, which converts muscle proteins into amino acids, and these amino acids are channelized to the liver for gluconeogenesis. In the adipose tissue, again lipolysis occurs, which are again channelized to the liver for gluconeogenesis. Cortisol is a pro-diabetogenic hormone which causes hyperglycemia. On bone, it reduces the bone mass, and this can lead to osteoporosis and subsequently fractures. Now, what is pharmacological action means? These effects are not produced by the glucocorticoids when they are secreted normally inside the body, but when given in large doses for therapeutic purposes, that is, when we prescribe them as drugs, the effects are produced, and this is called as the pharmacological action. It has got three main pharmacological actions. One is the anti-inflammatory effect, second one is the anti-allergic effect, and third one is the anti-immunity effect. We'll see what it is one by one. Cortisol has got a significant anti-inflammatory effect. First, what is inflammation? Inflammation is a response of tissue to injury. This injury can be either infectious or non-infectious. That is, how our body responds to injury is called as inflammation. The steps of inflammation are dilatation of the capillaries. Second step is the increased capillary permeability. Third one is the migration of the granulocytes to the site of the killing, to the site of the injury, and fourth one is the killing of the organisms. So these steps are mediated by various chemicals like prostaglandins, leukotrienes, and histamine. Now, what does this cortisol do? Cortisol will inhibit the phospholipase A2, which will decrease the arachidonic acid pathway and hence block the chemical mediators of the inflammation. Cortisol also stabilizes the lysosomal membrane so that the proteolytic enzymes are not released. It also inhibits the mast cells and prevent the release of the histamine. It inhibits the phagocytic and the bactericidal activity of the neutrophils. It also inhibits the proliferation of the fibroblast, that is, a scar tissue is formed less when steroids are administered at the proper time. So, this is the arachidonic acid pathway which generates the mediators of chemical inflammation by means of two pathways, that is, the lipooxygenase and the cyclooxygenase pathways. Here, the membrane phospholipids are converted to arachidonic acid by the enzyme phospholipase A2. This enzyme itself is inhibited by cortisol so that arachidonic acid is not converted to the chemical mediators of inflammation. Cortisol has got very strong anti inflammatory properties, and hence it is very often prescribed for the treatment of the inflammatory diseases. But, however, it should not be given for treating uh, acute inflammations which are caused due to infections, because if cortisol is given in infections, the toxic features of infection may come down dramatically because of the anti inflammatory actions, and it gives a very wrong impression that the infection has subsided, but actually the infection spreads, and we make a delayed diagnosis also, and the disease may sometimes become fatal also. So first, before giving steroids in inflammation, assess the inflammation whether it is infectious or non-infectious. In acute infections, the steroids are actually contraindicated. If indicated, if needed, it can be given along the cover of the antibiotics. There is a good anti immunity effect also for cortisol. It inhibits both cellular and humoral immunity, but more pronounced effects are there on the cellular immunity. It inhibits the lymphocyte multiplication, especially the T cells. It also inhibits the cytotoxic effects of the T cells. It inhibits the production of interleukins from the helper T cells, and the synthesis of gamma interferons from the macrophages and the lymphocytes. So, cortisol has got significant inhibitory effects on cellular immunity. So, this finding can be utilized in organ transplant patients, and steroids are routinely given in such patients to prevent transplant rejection. Cortisol has got profound anti allergic effects also. Allergy is mainly caused by histamine. Two types of allergy are there: local and systemic allergy. In local allergy, release of histamine causes itching, redness, swelling at the site of allergy. Whereas in systemic allergy, which is otherwise called as anaphylaxis, large amounts of histamine is released into the general circulation, and this will inhibit the heart, thereby reduces the cardiac output and BP also. So when cortisol is administered, it inhibits the degranulation of the mast cells and prevent the release of histamine. It also prevents the growth of the mast cells itself. Some of the synthetic steroids which are routinely used in clinical practice are prednisolone, dexamethasone, triamcinolone, and betamethasone. Cortisol helps in the maturation of the central nervous system, retina, and the skin in utero. It also facilitates the maturation of lungs by increasing the activity of the enzymes which are involved in the formation of the pulmonary surfactant. This surfactant will lower the surface tension in the alveoli and helps in the proper inflation of the lungs immediately after birth. Cortisol also changes the digestive enzyme capacity of the intestinal mucosa from fetal to adult version. Only this maturation process helps to digest the disaccharides present in the milk. Glucocorticoids play a very important role in adapting an individual to any forms of stress. Stress can be emotional, physical, or biological, and this causes an integrated response by cortisol along with the sympathoadrenal medullary system. So, this stress activates the hypothalamo hypophyseal adrenal axis, which will increase the glucocorticoids more than 20-fold. An important thing to note over here is resistance to stress cannot be increased by prior administration of steroids. There is a negative feedback control of the cortisol secretion at two levels. One is at the hypothalamus, the other at the pituitary. If the free cortisol, note it is not the bound form, it is only the free cortisol, is produced more than the physiological amount, the hormone itself acts on the hypothalamus to reduce the formation of the corticotrophin releasing hormone. Again, the excess of free cortisol can act on the anterior pituitary also to decrease the formation of the adrenocorticotrophic hormone, and the vice versa also can occur. When we give a therapeutic administration of steroids for long time, say a few years, for certain inflammatory diseases, the steroids should not be stopped on one fine day, because these steroids which we give is present in larger quantities in plasma will perform the physiological actions of the cortisol, and this will efficiently suppress the CRH, that is the corticotrophin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, and the ACTH, that is the adrenocorticotrophic hormone from the anterior pituitary, by the negative feedback mechanism, as I told in the last slide. When stopped suddenly, hypothalamus and pituitary will not be able to produce CRH and ACTH, and subsequently the cortisol on the very next day of stopping the therapeutic steroids. It needs around 10 months to regain its original form to produce the physiological quantities of the cortisol. So, this can lead to acute adrenal insufficiency, which can result in fallen BP, and the patient may even die of adrenal crisis if the steroids is suddenly stopped on the next day. So, the steroids should be tapered, that is, reduce the dose in a stepwise manner and finally stopped, so that the hypothalamus and the pituitary can recover from the crisis to produce their physiological quantities of the hormone. The steroids act through the transcription of genes in the cells, and this takes hours to days for their full actions to manifest. These are called the genomic actions. However, recently it has been observed these steroid actions occur within very few minutes. These rapid actions of the steroid are due to the direct action on the membrane channels or enzymes. These are called as the non-genomic action of the steroids. They actually activate various membrane enzymes that lead to the formation of the second messengers, and these second messengers in turn change the cell functions. These are called as the non-genomic actions of the steroids. Cushing syndrome is a pathological condition which occurs due to hypersecretion of the glucocorticoids. There are two different types of Cushing syndrome, ACTH independent, the other one is ACTH dependent. In ACTH independent type, the most common cause is the exogenous administration of steroids. So, when we give steroids for any inflammatory disorders for long time, we should have a regular check on for the Cushingoid features, and should be able to switch on to the alternative drug if any such features are noticed. Adrenal cortical tumor is a rare cause of ACTH independent Cushing syndrome. Pituitary tumors also can rarely produce excess ACTH, causing hyperadrenalism. There is a negative nitrogen balance because of the proteolysis in the skeletal muscles. So this can cause growth retardation as well as weakness in the muscles. This is called as steroid myopathy. The collagen synthesis is also decreased. So the skin and the subcutaneous tissue both are very thin. And also because of hyperglycemia, there is poor wound healing, and the skin is also more prone for infections. With regard to carbohydrate metabolism, there is hyperglycemia, glycosuria, increased glycogen synthesis in the liver, and insulin resistance. There is peculiar distribution of fat that is called as the centripetal distribution. That is, fat is present especially in the abdomen, face, and back. Face becomes round with red cheeks, and this is called as the moon face. Fat accumulates in the lower neck and the interscapular region, called as the buffalo hump. Why thin extremities? Because of the proteolysis of the skeletal muscles in the extremities to promote gluconeogenesis. Now, why there is reddish purple striae? Because cortisol decreases the collagen synthesis and causes thinning of the walls of the capillaries. So, they rupture easily and form small hemorrhages. Now, why edema and hypertension are there? Because glucocorticoids has some mineralocorticoid activity, and this causes sodium and water retention, and this leads to edema and hypertension. Now, why osteoporosis? Cortisol inhibits bone formation and also enhances bone resorption. And psychosis occurs due to the action of cortisol on CNS. So I had put the clinical features in this picture. The centripetal distribution of fat causes the pendulous abdomen, moon face with red cheeks, and the muscle development is poor. That is, the extremities are thin because of the proteolysis of the muscles. There is poor wound healing because of hyperglycemia, and abdominal striae are present because there is a thinning of walls of capillaries, which can easily rupture and cause intracutaneous hemorrhages. The treatment for Cushing syndrome is either resection of the entire tumor or can be tried with certain drugs like metarapone, ketoconazole and aminoglutamide, which will block the entire sequence of the steroidogenesis. So in this video, I had elaborately discussed on glucocorticoids. In my next video, I'll continue with the next adrenocortical hormone, that is the mineralocorticoids. Thank you.